it's illegal to block white applicants from jobs. So to try to circumvent this, they've gone around it a very sneaky way. What they're doing is they are posting job applications saying we will accept early applications from ethnic minorities. That means basically ethnic minorities have months to apply, and then there'll be a tiny window where white applicants can join, which can be a matter of days. In fact, in one case, only 48 hours for a job application.
She gave this speech talking about how it was majority Pakistani Muslim men who were racially abusing white girls, and she gave some examples of the racism that they experienced. And then, as she was speaking, Jess Phillips was rolling her eyes and kind of just, her manner was just disrespectful when you're talking about sexual abuse victims.
Look at their faces. They don't want to hear about Pakistani grooming gangs. They don't want to hear about the plight of white working class children being violated, as I say, with a baseball bat. But they're happy to hear about adolescence. That's music to their ears, and they want to push fiction and they want to completely ignore fact.
There has been, I sort of sense, a real darkness has descended over much of the country, even in the past 6 months, actually. I think it's palpable. I feel people are actually thinking this is a different place. Hello and welcome to Newspeak. I'm Peter Whittle, joined, I'm very pleased to say, by Rafe Hayler-Manku, our Senior Fellow Cultural Historian, Amy Gallagher of This Manor and also of Stand Up to Woke, and Senior Fellow Dr. Philip Kisley, who's also, as you know by now, I'm sure, our national organiser. Before we go into the week's news, Philip, you've got some quite imminent things coming up, haven't you?
Yes, we've got quite a lot happening with locals at the moment, starting tomorrow, and this is in Norwich, and this is EDI in the NHS, what you need to know, with Dr. Carol Sherwood of Save Mental Health. Then on the 19th of April, we've got Carlisle locals. How civil wars start and how to stop them. That's a must, I think. We've got on the 22nd, the monthly meetup in Dorset. And on the 24th, we've got the monthly meetup in Lincoln, and I'll be there. So if you're around Lincoln, please do drop in and say hello. I'd love to see you. Then on the 24th, we've got Beaconsfield and NCF locals, and that event is with the fantastic Charlie Downs. Then on the 27th, we've got Birmingham. That's an informal social. On the 29th, we've got Newcastle. That's a new event, and that again is going to be with me. I'm going all over the country seeing everybody. So if you're in Newcastle, please do say hello as well there. And on the 1st, we've got an event in Southend, and that's with academic Mark Beachill.
Great. Well, the one obviously tomorrow in Norwich, obviously it's quite late in the day, but it's always worth trying because
it is always worth trying for two reasons. One, that these events are free, and two, they are set up to be informative. We're trying to do lots of things that equip you how to deal with things, and this is one of the things. If you've got any queries or you're interested in locals or starting up a branch, email us at locals@newcultureforum.org.uk.
Lovely, thanks. Rafe, we've had a spot of light racism happening in the north of England, haven't we?
Yes, light or white, whichever way you want to call it. Another outrageous story emanating from West Yorkshire police, who seem to be guilty of all sorts of sins these days. They are actually blocking white applicants from applying for jobs there in an effort allegedly to promote diversity. And the way that they're doing this, essentially, it's illegal to block white applicants from jobs. So to try to circumvent this, they've gone around it a very sneaky way. What they're doing is they are posting job applications saying we will accept early applications from ethnic minorities. That means basically ethnic minorities have months to apply, and then there'll be a tiny window where white applicants can join, which can be a matter of days. In fact, in one case, only 48 hours for a job application, whereas if you get months of advance notice if you're an ethnic minority. Then they have these special panels to mentor ethnic minorities over the course of these months or weeks. And then members of that own panel then sit on the interview stage where they interview these candidates. And the whistleblower who's informed the Talk TV, the Telegraph, about this has said that in a 3-month period, not a single ethnic minority failed the interview stage of this. I mean, it's completely indefensible. It's potentially unlawful. It hasn't been tested in the courts, which begs the question, who arrests the police when they're unlawful? Do they arrest themselves? This does need to be tested, and hopefully the courts will come down on the side of common sense, although these days that's far from certain. They also have a tiered status, apparently. So gold tier are strangely Far East Asians, so Japanese, Chinese, Koreans are gold tier. Silver tier are Southeast Asians, so brown-skinned people. And then in bronze tier, you get non-British white people, so Eastern Europeans, and curiously the Irish. I didn't really think the Irish needed to be given a leg up in society today. But, white British don't even make it into the medal rankings. That's how much they think about the white British population. And, it has to be said, West Yorkshire Police, fourth largest police force, and they have 13 DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion officers, costing £1 million, which is quite remarkable given the amount we're told that the police are suffering from cutbacks. Not enough police to come and see you when your house is broken into, but more than enough to actually block you applying for a job. Completely scurrilous.
But actually, Rafe, can you sort of clear something up? I would have thought this is absolutely, and on the face of it, illegal.
Well, it hasn't been tested. I mean, their sort of nuanced way of doing it is the jobs are still open to white candidates, but they're allowing early applications. So this whole idea is an early application restricted to ethnic minorities. Is that unlawful? That needs to be tested in the courts. And it has to be said also, they're saying that the justification for this is that 23% of West Yorkshire are constituted by ethnic minorities, but they're only 9% of the police force. Well, I'm terribly sorry. 23% of, most, I would say, there's a far higher proportion of white people who want to serve in the police than there are ethnic minorities, particularly when many of those ethnic minorities just arrived within the last few years, can barely speak the language. They shouldn't be included in any of these stats anyway.
I think if they want to play this game, then maybe, we should play the game as well, and we should go along that route and say, look, if underrepresented communities are committing most of the crime, which they are, then they should be the lowest percentage of police officers. They should be the lowest percentage of people enforcing crime. And the communities who are committing very little crime, that's actually white communities, should be much more, should have higher representation. And I think that seems fair enough if you want to go down this ridiculous road of community representation. And it's not even about communities, it's about the colour of skin, it's about black and white. But this is really positive discrimination by another name, because if you're given 48 hours to apply for a job, to think about what you want to say, what you want to do, to go through to download the application form, you are not being given the opportunity to apply for that job. It's as simple as that. It is US-style positive discrimination, and that certainly is illegal in this country.
And in terms of the fact of it being representative, I mean, what's concerning about this is that West Yorkshire Police will cover many areas, including Bradford, that are highly affected by grooming gangs. Okay, so you've got a proportion of victims, white victims, where they are now pushing the police force to have more Asian or more ethnic minority police officers, and the idea that that's representative, but actually the crimes, as you say, were being committed by Asian people in these areas. So it doesn't, it's hard not to get conspiratorial about these things, but it does feel like there's a kind of push to kind of put a damper on kind of racial tensions by doing this. So.
I have noticed, by the way, I didn't really have on X, even Twitter, some people who would be considered to be centrist or lefty even, getting very hot under the collar about this too, and actually more or less admitting, I think it was Florin Imam, said, this is actually surely just anti-white racism.
Well, if you want to stoke, tension between racial communities, this is the way you do it. This is officially sanctioned racism against a community, and therefore it's no surprise if you keep provoking and sticking the white British population with a stick every week with another one of these outlandish efforts in which you are essentially diminishing their status as second-class citizens. Of course, it's going to provoke a reaction eventually.
Well, when we interviewed recently that guy, Professor Betts, David Betts. He was actually saying it's almost like they're provoking some form of conflagration.
Well, I mean, you've got this, okay? This is one thing, okay? On every Saturday in Leeds, you've got massive pro-Palestine march that is very aggressive. That one person from that march attacks a small number of Jews who were counter-protest, physically attacked them last week. And also, you've got this absurd campaign for Bradford City of Culture as well, which is presenting Bradford, just removing it from any kind of British culture and just framing it as a completely almost Muslim culture and nothing else. And that in a way is completely removing Bradford's heritage, Bradford's history, and still a proportion of people who live in Bradford.
Was the NHS ever like this when you were working in it?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen in the NHS that they will put on job adverts things like, we strongly encourage applicants from BAME, black and ethnic minority backgrounds. So, you know, they're not saying white people can't apply. I don't think they'd be that overt. But they are essentially saying that, you know, we prefer it if you were black or Asian. And if you're a candidate for a job interview and you go to the job interview and you see another candidate there who's black, you're sort of thinking, you know, the odds are against me because I'm white. But they do lots of things like that in the NHS. They do lots of kind of initiatives to promote black leaders or black people in management, and they'll offer kind of training or incentives for people who are from BAME, as they call it in the NHS, backgrounds to kind of get a help or get a leg up into management.
It's this whole equity thing anyway, isn't it, where somehow, you know, basically a workforce has to kind of reflect the community. Why does it have to, actually?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that goes back to my answer before, doesn't it? It shouldn't. It should just represent excellence. It should reflect excellence. But just going back to what Amy said there, yeah, I worked in the education sector for 25 years. I've been in some ludicrous scenarios in which people who were clearly not up to the job were given the job, and then afterwards everyone's saying, oh, yes, well, they've, you know, maybe they didn't answer these questions correctly, but they were very enthusiastic. That is absolutely true. Anecdotal, I know. But they were very enthusiastic, so let's give them the job.
It reminds me of that ridiculous black lesbian fire chief in America who said, of course, when your house is on fire, you're really more reassured if someone who looks like you comes and saves you. I thought most people were actually thinking, get me out of this house. And I don't think Shalonda on her high heels is going to be too much of a job taking you out. I want people who can actually do the job. I don't care if they're pink, yellow or brown, as long as they can, do what they're hired to do. That means, in my opinion, people like me shouldn't be a policeman, and women shouldn't be policemen on the beat either, because they're incapable of catching criminals. I can't catch the criminals. Desk jobs, detective jobs, fine, but there are certain jobs certain people excel at, and I don't care what colour or sex you are, as long as you can do the job.
It's just me and you then, Peter. That's all.
Amy, would you go along with that?
Well, definitely, yeah. I mean, if my house was burning down and someone that looked like me turned up, I'd think, oh, for God's sake,
what about the police?
What's she going to do?
Do you agree with him about the police?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. I think there is an issue of promoting women as well in areas where they probably aren't the best. They don't instill fear into people, and they're not necessarily good. And I mean, it's happening. This is DEI, isn't it? It's creating equality where it just doesn't work.
No one cares about street sweepers and shelf stackers.
No,
Equality that doesn't make any difference.
There are these construction guys working here where I live. And I sort of thought, no one's talking about the gender pay gap there, are they? Or, no one's really worrying about that. They were all kind of like men doing,
The North Sea oil rigs, very underrepresented.
It's extremely. Whereas, of course, when it comes to other areas, I mean, for example, the arts, massive overrepresentation of gay people in the arts, really, isn't there?
So, but again, just going back to my professional history here, there was a great big campaign funded, I think, by Arts Council England to get more gay people in the theatre. Because they were underrepresented. But this was funded. I'll have to look it up. It's from a while ago, but I think it was Arts Council England. I'm not sure, but it was funded. More gay people in the theatre. Terribly underrepresented.
More hairdressers and airline stewards as well.
Yes, yeah. God, okay, we're alienating lots of groups, so that's nice. It is demoralising, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You talk about a day doesn't go past. I mean, I'm thinking as well of the stories we're going to be looking at as well. One of which is we're having a good old laugh here about this, but I mean, it is serious, and that is what happened this week with essentially the government just trying quietly to bury the whole idea of any form of inquiry into the rape gangs.
Yeah, so this has been, I think, an appalling week, and people are just rightly incredibly angry with this shower of a government. So this goes back to the scandal of the Pakistani rape gangs and the fact that we didn't get a national inquiry. They then conceded and said that they were going to have 5, I think, local inquiries, and we're going to throw £5 million at it. £5 million is nothing for this kind of thing. It really is nothing. Now, this week, Jess Phillips has said, oh, well, we're not going to do that. They can have an inquiry if they want, but we'll do other things as well. There might be workshops, or people can get together and discuss things. It will be bespoke. In other words, they're watering it down, and they're removing any kind of central organising principle that will pull all of this data and information together, and there will not be a report and there will not be findings. Okay, I think that's the really important thing, because there's nowhere to go from that. They can say, oh, well, we're giving you money and we're allowing you to do what you want. Now they've had feedback from local councils, and I think that's code for community leaders. I really do. I think community leaders are involved in this. And that feedback is saying, well, don't have these inquiries, do something else, allow people to do other things. So it's utterly scandalous, it's utterly chaotic. Everybody has been up in arms about this, not just MPs, but the general public are absolutely fed up to the back teeth of this. Just recently, Yvette Cooper has said, "Oh no, but there will be an inquiry. There will be inquiries. There'll be more inquiries." So they're backpedaling massively. This is Operation Damage Limitation in full flow, and it just goes to show how dreadful they are. We need to get rid of them. We need to vote them out. We need to hold them to account. We need to protest. We need to write to them. We need to do everything. We need to be organised. They need to go.
Did you see, in relation to this, the Tory MP, Shadow Minister, who gave a very compelling speech, a very frank speech, but I'm sure about grooming cases and basically why they should have been in
Katie Lamb, I think she was called.
Yes, yeah. Katie Lamb, MP. And she also just was quite explicit about some of the testimonial. But how much has that resonated with people, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they've done this just before the Easter recess of Parliament. There's very few MPs when Katie Lamb gave this speech. It was a fantastic speech. And, you know, it's great that it's done it and it's brought some attention to it. And actually seeing the responses to her speech was shocking. And that's, you know, totally demoralised me. But as you said, this is...
Such as what? Right?
Well, she gave this speech talking about how it was majority Pakistani Muslim men who were racially abusing white girls, and she gave some examples of the racism that they experienced. And then, as she was speaking, Jess Phillips was rolling her eyes and kind of just, you know, her manner was just disrespectful when you're talking about sexual abuse victims. And then there was, I'm not sure if it was Labour or Lib Dem MP got up and said her blood was boiling at the fact, not at the testimonies of these victims, but her blood was boiling because Katie Lamb hadn't mentioned that white girls are also the victims of sexual abuse from white men. And she thought that was outrageous that she didn't mention that.
Lib Dem woman.
Yeah, yes. And then another person got up and said that, you know, this would offend Muslims, and they were terribly worried because they had Muslim families, and it was outrageous to call out the fact that these men were Muslim. And this is when Katie Lamb had given examples of torture, you know, that girls had experienced sex-based torture, which has happened.
One was violated with a baseball bat.
Yeah,
you know, it's that kind of thing.
It's something that you can't, it's kind of unimaginable. It's like a nightmare. And the fact that their response is not to, you know, that they would be looking to score party political points and actually accuse Katie Lamb or people that are raising concerns of kind of bigots, essentially. I just think to me, it totally demoralised me. I think this whole grooming gangs has changed the way I feel about the country in general. I don't really consider myself to be patriotic anymore. I love the country's history. But now I feel, I don't know, the fact that this is being pushed under the carpet and that they're even watering down these inquiries more, I do feel ashamed of it. I do feel like I think about the country differently because of this.
I think that's a very, you make a heartfelt point there, and it's one that I wrestle with a lot, and I know people do. It's this level of betrayal.
Yeah.
Actually, no, sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth. It's not just the betrayal, it's the fact that we are living with it.
Yeah.
We're
It's
not
hard.
happily living with it, but we're kind of tolerating it. Rafe, do you think there's anything in, for example, this initiative, which has actually gone quite a long way with Rupert Lowe wanting to do an inquiry?
Well, it's great that he wants to do an inquiry, but it's not going to be on a statutory footing, so it doesn't have the ability to compel witnesses. And I'm afraid in this context, when you have so many corrupt and rotten individuals and rotten councils and rotten social services and rotten police forces, these are hostile witnesses who need to be compelled under criminal sanction, essentially for perjury, to give evidence. And again, as Philip was saying, the amount of money you need for real inquiries is huge. It's in the tens of millions. Even the 5 million alone was a paltry sum. And those small inquiries, they're all going to dissipate and dissolve. It's only a major national inquiry that has clear findings. People get lost in the entire length of an inquiry. It's only the final report and the summary and the findings that really are of any relevance to people in terms of enacting change. And, let's be clear of what the motivation is behind this. It's also the blatant nature. One of the reasons people, I think, feel so despondent is the Labour Party don't care. They're so obvious that they're suppressing this, and they don't care about the backlash because, as you say, we just live with it, and there are no repercussions now. And this is being done because the Labour Party is petrified of the Muslim vote, petrified of losing it, and they are engaged in a policy of appeasing. They're appeasing Pakistani Muslims. And as we know, any government in history that's gone down a path of appeasement, it always ends badly. And as you know, and it's entirely corrupt. What you have here, let's be clear, these are Labour-run councils, Rochdale and Rotherham, corrupt Labour councils being shielded by a rotten Labour government. This is going back almost to the rotten boroughs. It's so corrupt, this thing. You didn't think this thing could exist in 21st century Britain. And, Philip quite rightly mentioned the involvement of community leaders. The Labour councils are in the pockets of these Pakistani Muslim community leaders. They depend upon the Muslim vote in these council elections. We had on this channel the very brave whistleblower and activist Raja Mia, who said how actually, thousands of postal votes were collected from non-speaking people who couldn't speak English in these communities by these community leaders. They just signed them and then they were filled in by other people. I mean, the level of corruption going on in these councils, and these Labour councils know they depend upon these postal votes and other votes, and so they will do anything to try to push this under the carpet. And not enough people are speaking about that aspect of it. It goes far beyond just simply keeping community relations.
It is about appeasement, and that's what Trevor Phillips actually said in the Telegraph today. But Jess Phillips is for me the figure at the centre of this. She is the Minister for Safeguarding women, and she has a constituency that is absolutely and totally in the balance. And as we saw, she was herself the victim of abuse from Pakistani potential voters. So there's a sense that I tweeted about this. Sorry, it's very emotive, this, isn't it? I tweeted about this, and it got a huge response. It got something like 25,000 likes when I said, look at their faces. They don't want to hear about Pakistani grooming gangs. They don't want to hear about the plight of white working class children being violated, as I say, with a baseball bat. But they're happy to hear about adolescence. That's music to their ears. And they want to push fiction, and they want to completely ignore fact purely because it doesn't sit with their worldview. It will be detrimental to their own careers. And it's just
they'll lose their
seats.
Well,
and they'll lose their seats. It's just wicked what they're doing.
I mean, I think what Jess Phillips is, she's hanging on? Is it a matter of hundreds or something? We're streeting another one. Hence, I think, this extraordinary fuss made about Ramadan, and putting on this big show that they did in Westminster Hall and everywhere.
As we said on this show before, it almost feels that Islam is the official religion of Britain now.
Do you know, you can't, I mean, we always say this, we've talked about it before, but we'll talk about it a million times more. I mean, when you hear certain things, Rory Stewart, this is not just to have a crack at, the hobgoblin, but you remember when he said, I think, about the rape case, sexual abuse in a couple of northern towns. This was quite recently. That's the level of kind of engagement and indeed factual knowledge that these people possess.
Yeah, and they deny the racial aspect as well. They say, they don't understand the statistics properly, and they just say that the fact that some of them were Asian or Pakistani is irrelevant, and that, white men commit these crimes far higher, but obviously there are far higher percentage of the population, but it was racially aggravated, and it was a race of people attacking white people.
Yeah.
But they just do not want to accept that or look at that.
But so this is potentially 50 towns and cities. But let's just get back to Rory Stewart for a minute. Even if it were 2 towns and cities, that should be appalling. That should be a scandal. That should be something that people are doing something about. To say that, it's the systemic abuse of white working class children from gangs of Pakistani rapists in two towns or cities, that it's just 2 towns or cities, is appalling. So sometimes you just have to reset, don't you, and actually listen to what they say.
Or even just one incident. I mean, if you had an incident, for example, of a black woman being gang raped by white men and they were attacking her because she was black, just that one incident will make the national news, and people would be talking about racism, immediately, and saying how atrocious it was. This happened to 10,000s, or even more than that, girls. And so the idea that people could just say, it's just a town, it's like, that's like still lots of girls. I don't.
Of course, as well, if you'd have the white gang attacking this black woman raping a black woman, it would be, what does this tell us about our society?
Yeah.
Blah blah blah.
Oh, navel-gazing galore.
Never ever hear. What does this tell us about this community? What does it tell us about this religion? Whatever it might be. I just want to return to what you were saying there, actually, because this alarms me. What you were saying. You said you're not even sure whether you feel patriotic. I'm not going to, get you to eat your words or whatever, but this is something that I hear quite a lot at the moment. People have gone from sort of managing to keep their patriotism intact. They're now thinking, a country that obviously seems to rather hate me, why should I love it? You see? And it makes me sort of angry, really, because we tend to focus our area on why we get angry at politicians. Isn't it about time to not exactly get angry, but to actually say to people, come on, snap out of it, start protesting or whatever, start doing something. It's not enough for people to say anymore, what can you do? What can you do? We do what we can by bringing these things more and more to people's attention. Half of the things that we talk about on this show, for example, and the guys do on the other show and everything, I think it's probably most people wouldn't see in the newspapers necessarily, and that's why we highlight it. But it's got to be kind of, it takes 2 to tango, and I sort of think, people could surely do more. When there was that case in of the school basically banning Easter. I know we're going a bit off topic. Why no protests at the school unless there were? I stand corrected. But when is this anger going to be shown? Well, this is what worries me.
Yeah, there was a protest afterwards, and it was a Christian group that wanted to cancel the headmistress. But it was a very definite from a Christian focus. Right. Okay. I agree completely, and I suppose that's what I was saying before when I had that little outburst. We've got to be activists, we've got to campaign, we've got to understand. And I've said this before, I don't think it just means going out and screaming and shouting in the streets. I think it means being sensible, understanding what's going on, and finding the clearest ways to be able to kind of hold these people to account. And marching in the street is all well and good, but we need to be able to kind of, become school governors. That's probably the first thing. Stand for a local council, be involved in your local neighbourhood. Get involved with children playing football and hockey and all of those things. Be the kind of small c conservative person that we talk about, I suppose. Any of those things that you can do. It's about those small Burkean things, I think,
little
as well.
platoons.
And little platoons, family as well, and being responsible in terms of family. As Jordan Peterson would say, keeping your room tidy. And working from the individual and going outwards rather than the other way around.
I think the thing is possibly one of the reasons why one feels frustrated is that there's no real meaningful political leadership.
Yeah.
If we felt we could get behind, do we really feel that? Do you feel that, Rafe? Do you feel that?
No, I don't see that. There's no political leader of any party that seems to be, singing from the same hymn book as the New Cultural Forum or our viewers in terms of the existential crisis that our culture faces. And, if we had for the last 14 years, say, a government that was patriotically conservative and spoke to these, encourage people to do these things, that's what you need, someone to actually increase awareness amongst the public, because I'm afraid one of the reasons you don't get protests outside these schools and so forth is that not enough people are aware about it, because only a tiny sliver of the population watches things on Twitter or X or on YouTube. Most people still get their information curated for them by the editors of the BBC and ITV and Channel 4. That's a sad reality. So there are millions of people who no doubt would be on side, and were they aware of the scale of the crisis, would get mobilized and motivated, but they're frogs in boiling water. They have no idea of what's around them.
Yes. I think possibly that might have changed a little bit, because there has been, I sort of sense, a real darkness has descended over much of the country, even in the past 6 months, actually. Yeah. I think it's palpable. Yeah. I feel people are actually thinking this is a different place. This is taking on a different aura.
At last, but I mean, it's taken the wholesale gang rape of little children to make people begin to think, and what I described there and what we've been talking about is just page one of how to be a conservative. There's nothing extraordinary about it, and that's what we used to do. That was the natural mindset for this country. It's amazing how it's changed, and how actually activists on the other side have taken those activities and weaponized them against us.
Do you know, it's interesting on this little between my sister Lynn, who runs the show here. She gets very, very deeply upset about news reports and things, but she's done that. She's just become very active in a local church, not from a religious point of view, even just basically in preserving it and going in and cleaning it and cleaning up, the graveyard and all of that stuff. That is, she's quite conscious. That's a small thing where I can make a difference, and that's true.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's activism. Actually, you could describe
now it
that
is
as activism.
Yeah. Now it is,
and that's part of the problem. Is if you are on your own watching the show, for example, you'd be intimidated to go into the Viper's Den. Why would you go onto the school board of governors if you think everyone's going to be against me? I'm going to be a pariah. That's why if you had a government actually in power who was actually encouraging this, who was doing their bit to reverse Tony Blair's long march, was putting more conservatives into positions of power over quangos and so forth, people would see the beginning of a sea change happening. But this is where NCF locals comes into the because as we have local branches, we now have a mass of people within areas where they can be of moral support, and they'll say, well, are we in the same school region? Well, let's go together and go to protest at this parents' meeting. Let's go as a group, and if there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of you at a meeting, you will have a feeling of strength and camaraderie there, where you can have the confidence to speak up and take action on these issues.
Absolutely, and as I said before, we're encouraging more of the sessions within the local groups, which are useful educational sessions of how to deal with EDI in the NHS, or how to think about society and what do we do. Yeah, so it's
yes, and also the thing with NCF, which locals, which I spoke about in my monologue last night, which I did, is the amount of campaigns they can do. People just often need the know-how of how to actually do a campaign. But on this is Islamophobia definition, for example, we've had
We have a campaign going on.
Yes,
that,
we do indeed.
Which branch is it?
That was in Endorses, Ray Pickett.
If you want to get involved in your local community, locals at newcultureforum.org.uk, do email.
Well, no, the thing is, the fact is that no one else is doing this, actually. Certainly not an organisation like ours. No. They're not doing it. And I it's great, what we're doing with the locals. However, I'm afraid we're going to have to carry on piling on the agony a bit. The next thing we're talking about is all much for muchness, is in fact, basically a new blasphemy law coming in, is it not?
Yeah, that's right. This is the story of a man who was charged recently under the Public Order Act. This is a Turkish man who was protesting outside, I believe it was a Turkish embassy in London. He was burning the Koran as a form of political protest about the president of Turkey and his concerns about the rise of Islamic extremism in Turkey. He's an ex-Muslim himself. And he was, as I said, he's been charged with a public order offence. Now, this Public Order Act is about how you behave in relation to individuals. So it's when you cause distress, harm, or alarm to an individual. Right. But he has been charged with causing distress, harm, and distress, harassment, and alarm to the religious institution of Islam. Now,
religious
institution of Islam has been...
And who's accusing
the Crown prosecution, yeah. Now, obviously, that sentence just does not make sense. Islam cannot experience distress. It can't it can't harass Islam because it's not a person. So they've taken this law, which is about causing distress to individuals, and they've kind of made it about Islam and about a set of ideas. And obviously we're not seeing this happen about any other set of ideas. So this is a blasphemy law by the back door. Now, there is legal challenge to that, but this isn't the only instance. There's another instance in February of a man in Manchester who's also been charged under the Public Order Act.
Right.
He did a similar thing. He burned the pages of the Koran on social media, again as a protest against Islamic extremism. It was actually against the Manchester Arena bombing, and he was saying he was doing it in defiance of Islamic terrorism. And he was actually charged with racially aggravated public offence. That's what the police said to him. And he was told that what he was doing would cause offence to the diverse community of Manchester. So again, we're seeing Islam being conflated with race. We're seeing this idea of diversity and ethnic minorities coming into it. But of course, both of these men who've been charged were not expressing racism in any form, and they weren't targeting Muslims. They weren't targeting individuals. They were making a statement about Islam. Just and that's enough to get you arrested and charged. And it should be said, I mean, I think, as I said, the second man was an ex-Muslim and he's an ethnic minority himself. So you do think, imagine if a white guy did this purely in protest of Islam. I mean, the law would probably clamp down on him even further. So we do now have a situation where you can't criticise Islam or you can't protest about Islam.
So you don't actually need a new Islamophobia definition coming in, because basically this is the epitome of a trumped-up charge, is it not?
Yeah, and the Crown Prosecution Service is being so disingenuous by trying to obscure the distinction between hostility towards a member of the Islamic faith to the institution of Islam. But as you say, this has not been actually tried in court yet. I'm hoping that the judges will actually throw this out because, the institution of Islam cannot be attacked. And what the Crown Prosecution Service is doing is essentially undermining one of the key pillars of Western civilization. Our Western ideology of free speech has taken second place to a foreign ideology, and that has to outrage anybody who believes in Britain and the West utterly, completely. And if it does pass, that means that no religious text can be desecrated. Anything will be a conviction. And of course, British satire is all about mocking institutions. That's what we do in British, going back to Gulliver Swift and everybody else. That's what we do. We mock institutions. And this is deeply insidious for many reasons, not only because if we do get a blasphemy law by the back door, it's going to embolden all of those hundreds of thousands of people who've come here from Pakistan, Afghanistan, where blasphemy laws and apostasy get the death penalty. That's if you're lucky enough to go to a court. You're more than likely to be lynched by a mob who will beat you to death or burn you. And essentially, those people are now living within this country who hold those attitudes and beliefs. So this is deeply sinister, deeply insidious. I think this is the most alarming story I've read this month, actually, because of the repercussions.
Yeah, and, blasphemy indeed. I mean, you've got this very emotive image of someone burning a holy book, but it really isn't about that. It's about the thin end of the wedge and what goes on after that. So, it will be you're not allowed to criticize anything, you're not allowed to do anything. The moment you say something, you will be racist, and then if you're racist, you're going to go to court and you're going to go to prison, and it's all about precedent, isn't it? And it's just so alarming that so many people are just going to be so terrified about this, and quite rightly so. Why wouldn't they be? But this is how people are shut down. This is why people shut up, and this is why, as opposed going back to what we were saying before, this is why people don't engage in activism. I'm not talking about the kind of fairly extreme activism that we've said, but the other kinds of activism, because they can be accused of anything in relation to anything. That's the problem. That's the really frightening thing. And so if you've got a mortgage, if you've got children, if you've got responsibilities, you're actually going to say, oh, well, what's important here, the short term or the long term? It's my children, it's the short term, so I'm just going to shut up. And that's what these people bank on, and that's why this lawfare, we're fighting this. This is going to be so incredibly important.
And it's not just about burning the Koran, because it's also the fact that he shouted profanities against the religion. Imagine that. It's the true-born right of every British person to say F you to whoever they want to say it to, including religions. No ideology beyond. That's almost worse than the burning the Quran issue, just for actually saying profanities against a religion, which goes completely contrary to our tradition. And you're quite right. If this does miraculously, or get past the court system, that means that what we say on this channel could be suddenly it'll have a chilling effect on all commentary. People on Twitter and X will suddenly feel that they can't say anything, which is you can't criticize child marriage, perhaps cousin marriage. Polygamy, even the rape gangs, perhaps you can't discuss for fear of causing offence to certain communities.
Well, yes, because that definition as well is that, let me get this right, Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness, right? That is it. Because I've just spoke about it last night. And in fact, even criticising this overhyping of Ramadan, is that not an expression of Islam? So that would come under the blasphemy thing. The problem is this, you see, is that you saying that this is the most important, this is the most worrying thing that we've been talking about. We've talked a lot about how the people in these positions have actually basically taking part in a silent revolution, right? That's the thing. It's not like that they are incompetent, which they are generally, but they basically want this situation to come about. That's what and trying to get people to understand that, who are voters, is very difficult without sounding, actually crazy.
The problem is we're having to deal with this now, and we're so far down the road. Everyone's talking about civil war, and rightly so. You had David Betts on your show, and the views went through the roof, and everyone's worried about this. We really didn't need to be here. We should have been tackling this stuff 20, 25 years ago in a very coherent way. It's this British thing that we always do, which is after the planes crashed into the mountain, think about how we might deal with it. When I say we, I'm obviously not talking about us, but I'm talking about the general public, the people who will not wake up and look outside of their own front window and see what's going on, the people who won't actually look at what's happening to their children at school, look at the materials that their children are learning. It's it has to take something on the front of the Daily Mail about someone head teacher banning Easter, or people stumbling across us as a channel. People should be much more awake, and I wish to God they were.
I think one's got to actually. Yes, you mentioned the guy with the mortgage and the family. Yeah. That's true. And I've always sort of said that. I mean, we're very fortunate. Look at us here. We are responsible to ourselves only. There's no big boss over this thing that's going to somehow or other stop us saying things and all of that, unless we're cut off by YouTube, of course. But I think there's got to come a time where people have actually got to say, I care enough about this to actually say this or do this, regardless of the consequences. Otherwise, we're going to end up with people thinking very much the way that you expressed earlier on, which is just, I've had enough. I'm not even sure whether this is the place that I even feel fond of.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel like that. And I think it's not just cultural anymore, it's political, because there is a lack of political pushback. You know, we've had a Muslim MP essentially saying that desecrating holy texts should be made illegal.
Yeah.
And where was the political pushback there? You want to see strong people who understand the history of this culture, history of our country, really pushing back and saying, well, that is absolutely wrong and will never happen. But you just don't see it, you know. And this Islamophobia definition, I think it's already being used kind of unofficially. You know, whenever there's a criticism of a Muslim MP, he will get up in Parliament and say it's Islamophobic. You know, any criticism. So I find it really hard to not get demoralised. I think we've had the most amazing history and we've done the most amazing things, and I love this country and I'm still, you know, proud of their origin. But I don't, you know, now I just look around and I just think, you know, it's hard to see hope.
Yes, it's very but there is all. We would not be doing what we're doing
if we weren't hopeful.
Not just hopeful, but determined. Yeah, because you've got to look at it this other way. Actually, I'm not trying to turn because you're a therapeutic nurse. I'm not trying to give you therapy.
No.
But there's another way of looking at it. You know, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to sit and mope or whatever?
And also what I think is that we live in times now that things can change quite rapidly. And that's what I tell myself, that things, you know, you can't predict what's going to happen in 5-10 years' time, because we just don't know what it will look like. And something may come along that will change everything. A person, I don't know if it's a person or something, who knows. So that's what I tell myself, is that it's not lost, but it is hard because there's so much injustice around it. It's
Just remember G.K. Chesterton, for we are the people of England that have not spoken yet. You know, the levers of communication are dominated by these people you're talking about, but the vast majority of this country is still patriotic and loyal. But they need to actually mobilise now. But you know, most people in this country still side with us on these sorts of issues, I would say.
Yeah. Well, we are going to carry on speaking a little bit more in terms of this Alice in Wonderland that we are living in. You might have seen a bit of a fracas on GB News last week, a bit of a fight between two of the presenters about the trans issue. So we're going to be going on to discuss that. If you want to sort of stay with us for longer, please do become a member, won't you? It's terribly important. Do you know we've put on hundreds of members recently, I'm pleased to say. And please also, will you join in? It's terribly important to us for your support. Anyway, that's a very long trailer for our next bit. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Philip. Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much, Amy. And we shall see you next time. Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization. And our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.